Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. John just gave me the sign that we are supposed to start on time here at allpointstv.com. I'm George Moss, the host of the program here called What's Going On? And we are going to tell you what's going on, and a lot is going on out here in the political arena. And we're going to try to say some things about what's going on that nobody else is talking about, because we think that some of them are really off the mark. And I don't mean just a little bit off, I mean way off. It's amazing what is coming across the airwaves. And a whole lot of befuddlement is out there because people are flipping the script and we don't know up from down. I mean, I think we've gotten to, I think we're back to 1984. George Orwell. I mean, we don't know up from down and in from out. And everything is being inverted in this conversation because some of the things that are happening in the political field right now, I think we've got to look at this and begin to put a halt to this nonsense. Anyway, we're here for the next hour. We come on from 2 o'clock to 3 every Monday. The program is called What's Going On? And we are coming before the program today called Satura's Black History Corner, and that comes on around 3:30 and hangs around for another 30 minutes or so. We're here for the whole hour from 2 o'clock to 3. We're glad to have you with us, and we hope you'll stay around, and I would like some time for you to call in and give us your views of what's taking place. We have our views here at the studio, and we are going to share those views with you during the next hour presentation here. We want you to stay tuned to all the programs here at allpointstv.com because people are working very hard at the studio to bring you the best quality programs we can bring to you, and the podcast programs that we do here at this studio and a lot of other studios we're in contact with. We hope to be able to connect up with them at some point and begin to put their programs on the air, and we can have an interchange of ideas between our studio and other studios around the country. But we've got to begin to unite and become a more united country, because we got some problems on our hand and we got to nail some boards down. We got to do it right now. We have some decisions to make, and I'll be talking about some of those decisions before we get off the air this afternoon. Okay, well, where do we start? We have to start, I think, well, let me start with something that I heard on my way to the studio, and that is, I think that interfaces with the larger question I'll be talking about, and that is the issue of the elections coming up tomorrow. And another one of 3 in a row Super Tuesdays we've had. We had one the 1st, we had one the 8th, and we're going to have another one on the 15th. And I think this may be the most critical one of all. And I think it's been taken that way by what I'm going to call the ruling class. I can see that being the case by the fact that Romney, Mitt Romney, who wasn't satisfied with getting trounced in 2012 in an election that he should have won. I mean, if you can't win that election, then isn't it time for Romney to shut up? I mean, you had an opportunity to be the president, the 44th president of the United States, and I'm sorry, the 45th president of the United States, because Barack Obama being in 2 terms, because he beat Romney when Romney should have won the election in 2012, is the 44th president two sessions in a row, which has been beating down the country now for 8 years. At the end of his term, on the 20th of January 2017, I can't hardly wait until that date gets here, because we need another first family, and we need a new president. And that's just the bottom line. There's no sense in us lying about it. This president has been a disaster for this country. And anyone that can't see it now, if you don't know it, what's that song say? If you don't know it by now, you'll never know it. And I'm not willing to spend any time explaining it to you, because that die has been cast, and this is absolutely clear that we have had a disaster on our hand, and a president that was in fact hid himself, and embedded himself under the corridors of this country's hope for what I think we have right now. And I think we have the candidate right now that we need at this point in time. And we thought we had that candidate in 2008. But what we had in that time period was a person that really embedded himself in all the things he knew the country was looking for, and he hid underneath that umbrella only to reveal himself once he got elected. And it didn't take us long to find out who he was, because he began to reveal himself almost immediately after his inauguration. And I saw him very clearly. As a matter of fact, I was in Africa at the time, but I saw him very clearly when the Gates event, Harvard University, Henry Louis Gates, remember that event where Gates would not give the police officers any ID, and they thought he didn't have to respond to them because, after all, he works at Harvard University. Who doesn't know who he is? As if everybody knows him. But he didn't think he had to give any ID, and when they in fact treated him like they were treating any other citizen and asked him to identify himself in a house he was in, but the police had been called, and they wanted to find out who was in that house because they'd been called. If they had not responded to it, and there had been a burglar in the house, and they had not appropriately responded to it, then they're going to be criticized, and they had to find out who he was. They know who he was, and ask him for some ID. And when he started mouthing off as if he didn't have to give any ID and didn't have to identify himself, they took him to jail, as they should have. And black police officers were supporting the officers also. I think there were only white police officers at the scene, but there were a lot of police officers in that police force that knew who this person was, knew that he was doing workshops, and how sensitive he was to the racial issue. And when they tried to accuse him, this was, I think, the first time they stood up trying to make this accusation. These officers are also racist, and they're doing all these things. When they came to his rescue, and here was this president that didn't even know what the facts were, but just jumped out there ahead of all the evidence, all the information that was yet to be collected about what had happened at that particular place where Gates had been arrested. And when he did not wait, people looked at that to say, what are we looking at here? And why is the president, in fact, injecting himself into a local matter, not only before the facts were known, but also injecting himself into it regardless of what the facts were? This is a local matter to be handled at the local level. So what is this injection of the president, who ought to be taking care of the national affairs? What is that about? Well, we now know what it's about, but that's the first time we actually saw him come from behind the mask. And I remember reading the words of Thomas Sowell in that case, where Thomas Sowell said that we need to look at what happened when that mask was lowered before that mask was put back up. But we will see it on repeated occasions where it was in fact lowered. So we've had a disaster, and that is undeniably so. And I said publicly, and I said in my post on Facebook, and I'm ready to swat all the gnats that come out there trying to act like we've had a euphoric, time of it over the last 7 years, it'll be 8 years when he finally gets out of office. And when that day comes, I don't know what you plan to do about it. I plan to have a I plan to have a personal celebration about it.
You got a bottle of single malt scotch ready to go, right? And you don't even drink, right?
I don't drink. But, John, I may be tempted. I don't think I'd be tempted, but...
I'll tell you what, I'm serious. I just read that they're actually having a shortage of single malt scotch. So I'm going to look around for a good one. When he gets out of there, I'm going to get everybody, even the non-drinkers, they can have a shot, okay? Won't kill you. Have a shot. Because, this guy he's destroyed this country. It was on the ropes, and he's pushed it over the edge into the audience. That's it.
This president has been one of and I think probably the worst president that we've had. And I'll tell you, those persons are putting Buchanan down there at the bottom. They have Andrew Johnson, and they have James Buchanan. Buchanan was the 15th president, and Andrew Johnson was the 17th president. And they have them at the bottom of the tier because Johnson was the first president to be impeached, and they failed by one vote to remove him from office. But really what they impeached him for was really illegal on the part of the members of the House and then the Senate. It should not have even been close for what they had the charges brought to the Senate on. The president is in fact impeached in the House of Representatives under Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5, and he is in fact placed before the Senate under the provisions, where it says in Article 2, Section 4, the President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office upon impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors in Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution. and that should never been brought against Johnson. I would indict him for some other things. I mean, I would in fact accuse him of some other things while in office, but that's not one of them in terms of what they were accusing him of in this case, which was the president didn't have the right to get rid of Edward Stanton, who had been, as a cabinet member, had been approved by the Senate. And then here's the Senate making the claim that since they had approved him in the office, the president has to get their permission in order to fire him. Which that's not in the Constitution, folks. And a whole lot of other stuff is not in the Constitution. What I was starting out to say here, though, was that the president of the United States has the right, and this is what I was listening to on my way to the studio. The president has the right to appoint a justice to take the place of Antonin Scalia. And to show you how disdainful our political leaders are, and we saw it, all evidence of it this past weekend in the Donald Trump episode in Chicago, which I will get to. But for them to make the claim that they don't care what the president sends up there, they are going to say no to any of the president's choices. What they should do, if they had any respect for the Constitution, they would do it. And that is, let the president send up the names that he thinks would be recommended for the office. But they stay within the venue of the Constitution, where they then carry out their constitutional role and say no to the nomination. But to say no to it before a nomination has been referred to them, that is disrespectful of the Constitution. They don't have the right to say that no nomination be sent to them, and it makes them look bad before the public. It certainly make them look bad in my book, because I know that is not what the Constitution requires. The Constitution requires them to act upon the nomination. It doesn't require them to act before nomination is made. You know, it's so much disrespect for the Constitution that you really wonder. I don't wonder myself, quite frankly, and I'm writing an article right now. I have not finished it yet. It's going to take me a little while to finish it, because I'm trying to write out of the box about what's going on here, and I'm trying to explain to the American people what this is about right now. And I will get to that before we get off the air. But this is a part of it in terms of this total disdain that we have for the law, the supreme law of the land. It's not the president, it's not Congress, and it's not the Supreme Court. We have a supreme law in this country. Can we get back to it? Can we, if we off the shores, can we roll back to it? Can we, walk to New Orleans to find it? Fast Domino, walking to New Orleans. 25 miles ago, what was that person put that song out? 25 miles ago, and feet get moving. Whoever that sang that song, whatever the tune is, we got to get back to shore here. We got to get back to the constitutional grounding points of this nation, or we're going to be lost. We probably are, to a large extent, we're lost right now, and we are in recovery and don't even know it. But this idea they have right there at that point, in terms of what they're talking about right now, is a subordinating of the Constitution. Because the Constitution requires for a process to be put in place. And the process is the president has a right to fill a position in his cabinet and in the appointment to the court. That's the president's responsibility. If they object to the nomination of the president, then they have a responsibility under the Constitution. And they can say absolutely no by rejecting it by a majority of the persons in the Senate. That's a process that we have. But what they're talking about doing, these turkeys, that's who they are. They basically are people that don't have respect for the American people, quite frankly. And we're going to be proposing some things we can do, because I think the country now is ready to deal with these people.
I've never seen such sheer arrogance on behalf of these people. These people, you and I would say, we come up with an idea, we put it out there, somebody might have a real reasonable reason why we shouldn't go through with it. Mm-hmm. These people, damn your considerations, damn your, the hell with your objections, your rationalizations or whatever. We want, you don't have a right to challenge because we're always right. And that's what's the most galling part about this president, his administrators, most of his supporters. They have this. I couldn't be Catholic because I don't believe in infallibility. Mm-hmm. Okay, and these people act as if they are infallible on every issue. Every issue.
They know best. That's why, and really, let's be honest about it. It's pretty much generalizable to all of the ones who are office holders right now on the federal level. They act as if they know best, and our voices have been muted because what do we know? We don't know anything. And they're even claiming that we don't know anything by the fact that we're now getting behind the candidacy of Donald Trump. And I want to definitely spend some time on that issue because I want to say a few things that nobody else is saying at this point. And my post is going to be, I'm thinking out of the box here, so I've got to spend some time because when you're doing some things that are kind of out of the box, you have to make sure that you're thinking clearly about it because it's something that nobody else is saying, and I have to make sure that I'm going around all the edges and narrowing it down to the point and fine tuning it so that I'm being clear and consistent because this analysis is not one anyone else is making. And I like to do that because I don't like to regurgitate things that I'm hearing everybody else say. I do take into consideration what they're saying, but I do not want to be grounded by it and be corralled by it because I have my own ways of looking at the political events. And I want to make sure that I share those ideas because everybody else can make their points. But they can't make the points that I would make. And I can't make the points they would make either, probably, in a lot of cases. Although I think that what I'm saying is a little bit beyond what I'm seeing a lot of persons talking about. Nevertheless, we have got to get back to a grounding point. And the grounding point, among all other grounding points, is what is the law of the land, the supreme law of the land, called for. I was reading on Facebook where somebody said that we don't know what the Second Amendment says, and it will be up to the next judge that's appointed to tell us what those 14. It's only 14. It's only 14 words in the Second Amendment. You know, the one behind the one that we don't seem to know a whole lot about because we don't know we have a First Amendment that calls for freedom of speech in this country anymore. Now we're saying that we don't know what the Second Amendment requires. There's only 14 words in it, but we don't know what it means to have the language saying that there should be no prohibitions placed upon the right to bear arms in this country. That's all of a sudden not clear. And somebody said, there's a post up that says that it will take the next judge, you know, it's 4-4 split right now, so it'll take the next judge is going to come in with infinite wisdom, then be 5-4, but the fifth verdict will be the one that has infinite knowledge that will tell us what we have known for 200 plus years, ever since 1791, when we put the Bill of Rights in the Constitution. And we knew pretty well up until that point, until now, what the words mean, but now we're confused by it. I got to have a fifth judge appointed. They can now tell us what it means. And they're positing that because they think that if the next judge is appointed by Barack Obama, that they will come in there and they will tell us that it does not mean that we have the right to bear arms, or they can restrict it in certain ways in which we don't, for all practical reasons, we don't have the right to bear arms because they're going to define it in such a way as they put parameters around that ownership and the possibility that we can arm ourselves to defend ourselves.
One time I talked.
They're getting to.
One time I talked to the people from the ACLU. I was donating money to them for on a monthly basis back when they pushed through the Patriot Act. You know, I wanted to stop that, but you know that was pretty much gone. You know, done cause. But anyway, one day I was talking to one of these people, and I said, "Why don't you guys defend the Second Amendment?" She goes, "Well," with the woman I was talking to, said, "Well, the way it's defined is the courts have a right to, to restrict gun ownership if they choose to." And I went, "Where's that at? Where's that in the Constitution? How is that arguable?" I said, "Where's the argument? So you say that you got a right to limit freedom. If that's the case, then why are you in existence for?" And I hung up from her because she was getting really abusive with me. I don't even go into it because you don't like swearing, but she was calling me names.
Yeah, and so, I can imagine.
And it's like I'm an informed person. And I said they kept on wanting me to increase. I said until you actually get behind rights instead of gay rights. Everybody's got a right to choose who they want to be. I believe that. Okay, it never should have got to the point where they could that was actually nobody questioned that, and they just assumed that was an illegal instance. To do that. But beside that, I mean, that's all they started pushing was for gay rights. Well, that's when that's the only thing they're emphasizing on, spending all that money on that. And I said, well, what about the other violations? And they said, well, it's like, well, this is what the hot topic item. I said, so that's what you can get your money out of.
Yeah.
So,
John, I wrote a post yesterday, and I was stating that this was a defining moment in Chicago, as far as I'm concerned, for all the candidates. And I'm talking about, in particular, Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, and John Kasich. I think they were called upon to fulfill a responsibility as candidates running for the highest office in the land, beyond which if they fail this test, then they're not qualified to be president of the United States. And I said the test that they did not pass was to come out unequivocally, not as politicians, but as respecters of the Constitution of the United States, because they were called upon to speak clearly and unequivocally that a person has a right to speak in this country without intimidation or without acts of violence. And when they did not do that, they disqualified themselves as being eligible to be president of the United States. And one person wrote on that post and said, I have to say they were saying it respectfully, but it doesn't matter how they were saying it. It's what they were saying. And the person said that I don't think that can be a disqualifier in and of itself. And my response to that was, you tell me how a person that does not stand up for the First Amendment in the Bill of Rights, that's organized that way. I mean, there's an organization in the Bill of Rights. First of all, in Amendment 1, all of the rights in which you are born, your natural rights, are contained there. For example, your right to speak is contained there. Why? Because it's a natural right. And what makes it a natural right? Let me say something nobody else has said. It is a natural right because the government did not give you your tongue. You were born with your tongue. And therefore, your right to speak is not something that's given to you. You're born with the right to speak. First of all, in gibberish, and then you are taught into a language, whichever language is on the soil. But your tongue was given to you at birth.
Then you go back to...
Not by government.
Then you go back to, when you become a politician, you go back to speaking gibberish.
Yeah, once you become, and that's what we have in Congress right now. I mean, this is incredible. I mean, I'm flabbergasted. But I don't have respect for these guys. I don't want anybody to think that I respect the politician. If anybody coming to me talking about respect for politicians, I'm the last one you want to talk to, because I know who these guys are and these ladies are. I use these words loosely. I say gentlemen and I say ladies. I don't want to use those terms when I talk about politicians, because you're not talking about don't get me started on that. Because I'll be there on that one for a while. But when I get through with this post today, it'll be clear. Because I'm working on some things on this post, and really the post I've been doing the last 3 or 4 days, quite frankly, I've been putting a lot of time into it. When I say a lot of time, I'm not talking about sitting there all day. But I'm talking about, when I say a lot of time, I'm talking about putting like 2 hours into it. Because after I write the post, because it's something I'm writing that's out, that's kind of like out of the orbit of what is being written about and other persons is writing on the same topic, because I don't like to repeat other people, then I have to go back and look at it and look at every sentence and see if it's coherent. Not only coherent, but is it thematic? Not only is it thematically, clear, but are the points consistent with what's being said from one paragraph to the next? And that takes a little bit of time. I'm talking about syntax here, and it takes a little bit of time. So I try to make sure that I'm not out here just, emoting and doing a lot of things that waste readers' time, because I don't want to waste people's time, and I don't want to waste my own time. So it takes a little bit of time along the lines of getting clarity and consistency in thought and making sure that you are coherent, thematically coherent, and I want to make sure that I do that. So it's going to take and when I get back it'll take me another 30 minutes. I've been working on it for about an hour now. So when I get back, I plan to close it off and that. But what I'll be saying on that post is what I'm saying here at the studio. And that is that anyone that did not come out last week, I listen to these candidates. I listen to John Kasich. He's not eligible to be president of the United States. I listened to Marco Rubio and what he said about this flare-up that occurred in Chicago, that Bill Ayers was out there. George Soros was, in fact, financing it and was in the background and said that he's going to spend $20 million on stopping Trump. And it's okay to spend money on a campaign, but you don't have the right to spend money on paying people to get in the street and stop speech.
Is he even an American citizen, though? Because I know the other countries in Europe want him.
They want him, John.
They want him on trial.
And they shouldn't want him because we did to the currency in those countries.
Yeah, see, and this guy is always deriding capitalism. The system we have for banking and our money and monetary supply is not what the capitalist system really intended for. So yet they're creating a straw man. They're saying this is what brings you to this is what capitalism brings. It's the things they foisted upon us. Mm-hmm. We allowed it for some reason. I don't know, because of the time of crisis. It was always in a time of crisis. Mm-hmm. We needed more money. So how do they do that? You have a war going on. That's usually the form of crisis they have to put past us to push these draconian measures over us. Mm-hmm. And then we accept after the war's conflict's over with. We're so happy now we're not losing our kids, then we go back and let them do more and more to us. Yeah. Why do we let these people pull our strings?
Yeah, George Soros should be in jail. But we have, as everybody knows, we have selective prosecution in this country. Lois Lerner, for example, of the IRS, Lois Lerner should be in jail, using the IRS to target American citizens for their speech. If you don't put people in jail behind that.
Johnson started doing that, LBJ, because people were critical of him, so he set the IRS upon churches.
Yes, he did.
And they also did that later in the 90s and 2000s.
And you know what? And he did that he did it because Johnson was Johnson, but he was a protege of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Roosevelt did that as well. And Johnson was a protege of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And he was following a line. I'm not saying he was influenced by it. I'm saying he was just as corrupt as any other politician that holds that office. And we've got to understand that our politicians have not been virtuous. We're not talking about virtue here with these politicians. And when you see them up there in power, you have to understand that they're not there because they're virtuous. They're there because they're vices. And that's how they got there. We don't have Sunday school teachers in power. And we have got to understand that when they get in power, the minute they rear up and show themselves as being self-interested, which is what they are, then we know we've got to get them at that point. Because they're in there out of self-interest. They want to wield power. But once they begin to wield it and show us they're going to wield it, then if we don't have that board nailed down and they're not afraid to show that to us, then we have to move on them, in that time period and do so almost immediately. You see, I'm from that. I understand what Jefferson was talking about. When Thomas Jefferson said that when you have the people who are feared by the government, you have liberty. And when you have the government, who fears the people, you have liberty. But when you have the people who fear the government, you have tyranny. And I know what he's talking about. And we can ask the people out there in the listenership, are you fearful of your government? And I use the word your in quotation marks. Are you fearful of the government? Or does the government fear you? The government, let's be honest here, the government has no fear of the American people. And that's why I'll be writing in this post here today that we're not being governed by the federal government. We're being ruled. We are absolutely being ruled in this country.
The power of the tax is the power to destroy. Just think about it. Every time you hear they want to curtail some kind of activity, they want to put a tax on it. And the reason why is they're going to put the tax high enough so that most people are going to forego that activity or that good or service or whatever. That's what it is. And people don't understand that. I mean, it's all about punitiveness. It's not, okay, what are we gathering taxes for? What do we collect taxes for? Mm-hmm. It's not to fund the necessary services. It's not. It's really not, because let's face it, I don't know how they're funding them, because if you look locally, I don't know how we get done what we do get done, because we don't have a local tax base, and yet we still get police and fire protection, and some of it are police and fire protection, and we also get the trash picked up weekly. So, so where's that money coming from? Where's all this? That's the big question. It's punitive. Basically, then they wanted to, Bernie Sanders and his folks thinks it's not fair that somebody else makes a lot more money. They just want to, they always use the excuse. So the reason why people are not, they're lacking, they're on this lower socioeconomic level is because they have lack of opportunity.
Yeah.
That's a load of crap, because I know a lot of people have been at false start several times going to school. They just don't have the discipline enough. Just because you got the money doesn't mean you're going to go through school. Mm-hmm. There's other things there that rubber meets the road. You got to actually show up for class, do papers, do research, do tests, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And they fall apart, fall by the wayside. But yeah, it's society's fault because we don't encourage them enough.
Yeah, and we have and John, we have to understand what they're telling us, because underneath their words, nice sounding words, underneath that shield, behind that concealment, behind that mask, is what they are not showing what they're talking about. And let me tell you what they're talking about. When they talk about things like what Bernie Sanders says, when he talks about stuff being free education, free this, free something else. You won't have to pay for your college education. What is the elephant in the room that is not being discussed out in the open, but certainly what is in their purview and being concealed from the public, is that what they're talking about are their guns. Let me tell you something. When a politician is telling you about that which is free, and I hear these persons that are interviewing these people who ask a ridiculous question. Let me tell you how ridiculous it gets. Bernie Sanders was being interviewed, I think it was last week, because he came on Fox for a change. They don't come on Fox, but Fox is a liberal station also. It's just not as liberal as the other stations are, but they've shown their hand as well. They're part of the establishment. And they are no more independent of that establishment group, these liberals, these statists, than any of those stations are. They're just not as out in front with the controls that they are cooperatively joining into. They are just as much into maintaining the status quo, but a little more in a subtle sense than the others are. The others are cheerleaders. They're cheerleaders also, but not as easily detectable to be so. And I have all kinds of evidence of that being true, just based on the laboratory learning that we're in right now through the Donald Trump campaign. Because a lot of things have been revealed through this campaign, quite frankly. But when Bernie Sanders said in an interview last week, I think Matt Bear was the one that was doing the interview, and he said that everything he was saying pretty much everything's going to be free. But the question that came after that was really quite interesting, because the question was, it's absurd. The question was, well, how are you going to pay for it?
Well, I'd like to know this. If old Bernie still can go around with this idea that everything can be free, why is he? I get emails all the time from his camp asking for donations. Well, gee, I guess you haven't convinced everybody you got to go with the Pied Piper named Bernie Sanders enough to give the printing costs and give you airtime and Oh, by the way, here's another thing. Locally, they are charging for Bernie Sanders yard signs, $3 to $5. Yeah, $3 to $5 for a Bernie Sanders sign. So I mean, okay, so this guy's basically got his campaign as a marketing scheme for himself. Where's that money going to go to? Yeah,
I
think old Bernie, if he's going to fail. I'm pretty sure he's going to fail on this attempt, so I hope so.
Yeah.
Basically, he's going to have a nice little nest egg to retire on or do whatever with, maybe bet the horses or whatever. I don't know. But I mean, he's still getting money from what he does. I mean, it's a joke.
Can you imagine somebody asking a question after somebody tells you that everything is going to be free? Can you imagine somebody coming behind that particular statement and then asking the question, well, how are you going to pay for it? You see, the question is illogical, because if a person tells you it's free, the question is not how you're going to pay for it, because you don't pay for free. Here's the question. The question is, how is anything that has a cost attached to it, how is that free? Not how you're going to pay for it.
The libertarians got this expression, there ain't no such thing as a free lunch.
Right.
There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. Somebody's picking up the tab there. So you should be questioning who's going to pay for this, because he will not. You just keep on saying, who, Bernie, who? Who's going to pay for this, Bernie? Who's going to pay? Just keep with that. He's going to get frustrated and walk off set because you're not an idealist. You're not a visionary.
Right. He's talking about forcing you to pay for it. But if he tells you it's free, you can't come behind that statement and ask how you're going to pay for it, because he just told you it's free. So then the question got to be, if you're having a logical conversation, you got to have him to prove that it's free.
But he makes a point too, like he makes a point. We could do all this, we could do this, we could do this if we didn't have the military expenditure we have. Yeah, I agree with you. That's the reason why all these socialized countries in the world can do all this stuff for their citizens. They don't pay the money towards their military. America's military actually supports most of the socialistic leaning countries in the planet. Or they do. It's our military presence that keeps them relatively free and safe. Okay, so if we curtail that, yeah, we could. I said this before myself. We could give kids education. We could but guess what? I just don't see that happening, and especially when old Bernie here has actually voted for the majority of these expenditures since he's been in office. Mm-hmm. He's voted for increases in military spending. So, and he's also, I don't know where he stands with Israel, but that's a country we got to address because that's giving it currently $11 million per day. Mm-hmm. What's that, like $4 billion a year?
About $4 billion a year.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's absurd right there. I mean, couldn't $4 billion going back into our own economy do a significant amount of difference in the urban settings and stuff? But yeah, see, but he talks about, he's basically, the flatulence smeller, the person you're sitting around and going, who did that, he does that. He's the one that's doing it and then wants to put the blame on somebody else.
Yeah, I hope you will not bypass that point I made about the absurdity of the conversations we're having. See, it sounds like it's logical, but they got us in such an incoherent and illogical mode of thinking that we can't really get to the rulers and who the rulers are, because they are first and foremost great propagandists. They are masters of deceit. And that's about all they master in, but they're very good at the propagandistic aspect, because they have to mask themselves in order to get away with the nonsense they get away with. I mean, Bernie Sanders is talking about guns. He is talking about using the power of the state to take it from those who are producing wealth and are accumulating wealth and taking it and then paying for these things he claims is free. It may be free to the recipient, but it's not free to the ones they're taking it from. There's a very high cost, and they will not pay the cost unless there's a government gun in back of it. I was at a store yesterday, and I went there because I'm buying water now for my dogs, because I'm not giving my dogs that water coming through those pipes. So I started to buy the 5-gallon drums for the household needs. I'm buying because you can't pour that into the containers for the dogs, and so I have to get the bottled water. I get spring water. I don't get the distilled water because everything is out of that water, and that zero water is another problem where it didn't have anything, and it was supposed to have some minerals in it. So I get the spring water and that. But being at the store, I took out a $20 bill, and I looked at the absurdity of that. You look at the currency. It's not money; it's paper. And you look at it, and it says that this is legal tender for debts, personal and private, or whatever it says there. But it really is saying here that you will either take this paper that's printed a certain way, got certain pictures on it, to distinguish it from all the rest of the paper. I mean, you can't just cut up some paper or go down in the basement and start trading out paper that looks like it, or you go to jail. But what it's really saying there is that they will either take this paper that's worthless as legal tender. They don't say money, it's legal tender, or they'll go to jail if they refuse to take that as part of the transition between the two. But I bought something that has value and gave them something that does not have value but has in it government force. That's all it is. It has in it government force. And they either take it or get reported to Bernie and people like Bernie, because they are forcing the producers to take something that has no value in it to give value in return for no value. And they would only do that. You try passing some of your paper to them.
You think that Bernie Sanders read Atlas Shrugged and said, "What a great idea"? Do you think that's what he did?
You know what? I don't think any of these guys are that learned. I don't have any evidence. In fact, there's no evidence, because when you go back and look at these people that are wielding power, there is no evidence that any of them know anything. That's the thing that really gets you. That they want to act like they have some experience from the mountaintop, and that they have something that they know that we can't know. I mean, they know the numbers of what the minimum wage should be. They don't know that. The minimum wage can't be determined by a person in a room, because all jobs are different. And all productive efforts are different. Some salaries, if you notice it, that some salaries are up here at this level. You can find that in the university. For example, in the English department or in the humanities department, the salaries are different. You go over there, well, let's say in humanities. You go in humanities and you go over there economics department. Those persons are not a dime a dozen. And they get a higher salary in humanities than maybe the one that teaches history, for example, or teaching my field. They don't get the same cut of income, because even inside of the various departments, humanities, for example, or science, or in psychology and those fields, they actually quantify the salaries based upon what the merit is in that. And there are some skill levels above some other skill levels. I mean, I write better, I think, than most of them that are down there. And the reason I say that is because when I was down there, I was doing the writing in many of those meetings I was in.
You notice something, though? I've heard people use this analogy. I don't know if you're a Star Trek fan or not, but they use an analogy. Bernie Sanders is kind of like the Star Trek person. They have, it's a Star Trek society he represents. Would you ever notice Star Trek? I don't know if you ever watched the series, but the captain and the officers had luxurious, rooms. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think the average crewman had that. And if you had a red shirt, they always idealize the Star Trek world as being this kind of egalitarian society, but yet there's still captains and there's still admirals and stuff in the hierarchy of the Federation. Mm. And what was the perks to have all that responsibility and have to actually basically live your life even in more goldfish bowl than anybody else? So there's always perks added to leadership that this Bernie Sanders is not addressing. Let's face it, he's got free mailing. I know that. And senators and congressmen get free mailing and stuff. Breaking mailing privileges and stuff. So I mean, he's already this guy's sort of touch. I mean, when do you get in power? 80, 81, something like that.
If you pay Bernie Sanders, and if you pay these other, I call them earlier turkeys, you pay these politicians what they're worth. If you pay our soldiers what they're worth, if you think the soldiers are worth more than $20,000, then and you think they're more valuable to the country than living in barracks, as if they just meat over here stacked up. You think they're worth more than what they're getting paid? And do you think that these politicians, these members of Congress, are worth $174,000? Probably costing the taxpayers $1 million a piece when you look at all the perks they get.
Plus the way they stick away the doggy bags for millions and millions and millions of dollars when they walk away. I mean, Bernie Sanders claims he only got 300-some thousand personal wealth. I think that's stuff he's reporting. The money, the account that he's reporting. I think it's probably somewhere offshore, somewhere else, more money. But
if he's worth $350,000, it'll be a miracle, because the average income of those persons in the Congress is $960,000. And 50% of them are millionaires, and they're not that smart.
Well, they don't know this. If that's his personal assets, after being that long in power, I forget when he became a senator, how many years ago. If that's all he's been able to abscond with the people, then he's not even good at being a criminal. So I mean, why would I want him as president?
If you're not a millionaire in that old boys club and now old boys and girls club, and you're not a millionaire, then that's malpractice in terms of your criminality. It's like what Ben Carson said, right? When Ben Carson was saying that if the Al-Qaeda and ISIS is not embedding themselves in these refugees that are going into Merkel, are you listening? What about you over there, James Cameron over there in the UK? And Francois Hollande? What about you? If ISIS has not embedded itself in the refugees coming out of Syria, then that is terrorist malpractice. That's a very good point made by Carson, right? And if you have a member in the cesspool of the federal government, it's nothing but a cesspool. And you don't take my word for it. You know, I always try to arm myself with these books. And here's a book. This is a book written by Thomas De Lorenzo. I'm not making this up. The title of De Lorenzo's book, and he's one of the major writers out there, a person that is a true patriot and unafraid. You know, they say on Fox, fair and unafraid. Give me a break. Give me a break. I found something out yesterday about them being fair. I didn't know this until yesterday, that they had, during the debate, when they were trying to say that Trump University had a D-. I didn't know that Trump had called one of his surrogates and told him to fax the report to Megyn Kelly, Matt Bear, and Chris Wallace, the Three Musketeers. Well, two musketeers and a lady. two men and a lady. I didn't know they had faxed that to her. He took it over to them during the desk. I didn't know it until yesterday. He took it over to the desk and showed them the fax copy of the real rating of Trump University, and it was an A or A-. Gave it to them. He said that on the air yesterday when Mike Wallace was interviewing him, and he told Wallace, and you all didn't report that. Well, I didn't know they'd given it to them, but that gave me another thing. That gave me another way of understanding what Fox is doing, because Fox is just as much against Donald Trump getting the nomination as any of these other guys are, and they are trying to take this guy down just as much as the rest of them are trying to take Donald Trump down, and that's been revelatory. That has been a revelation about what Fox is. And if you want to claim that they are different than MSNBC, only by degrees. And that's been revelatory to the max. But I brought this book here. I don't have to tell you about the gangsters, because too many writers have written about it. And it's not just De Lorenzo. There have been some others too, like Peter Schweiker, for example, who does a good job. Wrote several books about this gangsterism in government. But De Lorenzo's book is called Organized Crime. Now, he puts that at the top, in bold print, organized crime. And you might think, well, organized crime, we're talking about the mafia. No, we're talking about the mafia. We're talking about the legal aspect of the mafia, the real mafia. The mafia that's not the legal arm, these are the JVs that Obama was talking about. When Obama was talking about the ISIS, these are the JVs, right? Well, the mafia are the JVs. The real mafia, the ones that have the cover of law where they would not arrest themselves but can arrest the other guys that are competing with them, that's why they're the JVs. He talks about organized crime, and he says at the bottom of the book, because you might have thought he was talking about these JVs out here. And he says in the undertone, the subtitle of the book, he names it The Unvarnished Truth About Government. That's organized crime he's talking about. Government organized crime. So those guys are in Congress, and they are not billionaires when they come out, like Nancy Pelosi, who's worth $35 million now. You think she earned that with on $174,000 by that is which is on top of the table?
And guess what? Didn't a couple years ago they actually passed legislation that allowed them to even get away with quicker inside trader information to actually react to build their portfolios. Even when the spotlight allegedly was on that such practice, they actually passed law that allowed them to do it even much more rapidly. So I mean, they're always self-serving, and if you think they're out there for you, I can't say, I don't want to say an idiot, but you're close to it. I don't like using that term, but you got to really look at just the track record. Look at the track record and see how it plays out for you and the rest of the people.
Yeah, I'm gonna nail that board down in my article when I get back to my office. I'm working on that aspect of it, because that's all an illusion. That's all propaganda on their part, and they're very good propagandists. In this book right here, I think I brought it. In this book right here, I think it's chapter 13. It's called Propaganda and Espionage, and this book is written by Judge Napolitano, Andrew Napolitano. It's a very good book, and I would definitely recommend it. As I said once before, I don't consider Napolitano to be a scholarly writer, but he's an honest writer. And his honesty is his credentials, and I would have that trumping a lot of these persons that write scholarly works, and they put their own bias into what they write, and they slant it so that it is not really the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But he writes his book called Theodore and Woodrow: How Two American Presidents Destroyed Constitutional Freedom in the Country. And in the book, he talks in this one chapter on propaganda, where he's talking about Woodrow Wilson. And the people he talks about the people who were against World War I, they were against American interest into it. In fact, when Wilson ran for re-election in 1916, he ran upon the principle of he kept us out of war. Knowing in the back of his mind he intended to get involved in the war as soon as the election was over. And in fact, we saw that in terms of how quickly the U.S. got involved in it. Right after the election, I mean, he was inaugurated March the 4th, 1917, and guess when we got involved in the war? In April, the following month. April the 17th of 1916. April the 6th, I think it was, 1917. I know it was in April, and I think it was April the 6th. It wasn't even a month, a little more than a month after he had been inaugurated for the second time. But he had in the back of his mind he's going to do that while telling the American people that he kept us out of war. But what you have with the Wilson administration is that Wilson knew that the people in America were against this war. We were against, our founding fathers were saying that we should stay out of entanglements in Europe. In fact, I'll say this as well. I consider World War II to be Wilson's war. Because you know what was happening in Europe before the U.S. got involved in it? There was kind of like even Steven among those powers. And we're going to have to settle for a lesser penalty against Germany. And really there would have been no loser. They had to declare a stalemate, which would not have been what happened given when the U.S. got involved in it and pushed the balance of power on one side against the other side, which then became a more punitive settlement. I mean, $33 billion, all of it, the war got to be paid for totally by Germany. The fact that Germany had to take the total blame for the war being caused when there were many players involved in it. They would have to sell on more egalitarian terms. But when the U.S. got involved in it under Wilson then made the terms go to one side as opposed to the other. And the evenness of the war, in terms of having ended on more even terms, brought Hitler into existence later on. Because that punitive thing created a tremendous amount of anger in Germany, and a demagogue comes in as a result. I'll give you an example. When Germany was not making its payments on time, because these damages were punitive, $33 billion, and paying for the whole cost of the war, when Germany welched on its payments, both Belgium and France went into the Ruhr Valley, which was the industrial center of Germany, to take over that resource as a punishment for that payment being late. Can you imagine what that does inside of Germany? And then when this demagogue Adolf Hitler comes on the scene, that's what brought him on the scene.
Well, I don't know if you remember this. John Maynard Keynes, a person I don't really have a lot of. Disagree with his, his economic model. But anyway, he actually said back at the end of the First World War and the Treaty of Versailles and the economic sanctions and liability put on Germany, he said it would give rise to another war. He said that. He predicted that.
That was Wilson's war.
Yeah, and he predicted he wanted to prevent that, and he actually, as much as I have issues with a lot of other stuff and the neo-Keynesians and all that stuff, he was absolutely perfectly dead on with that one. I
don't have any respect for John Maynard Keynes. Keynes was at the conference they had in 1944. We need to go back and look at that conference as well. Keynes was also at the founding of the United Nations and was a fundamental member of that founding point. I think it's very dangerous in terms of some of the ideas that he had, and he was one of the members that was at the Brentwood conference in New Hampshire that was held. I think it was held like over the course of 21 days, in which they came up with this. United States would be the one that would be over the currencies after the war came to a close. The 44 countries that were the Allied countries would have the currency attached to the currency of the United States. And these politicians would not hold on to any agreement. They were like a kid in the candy store, and look what they did with that agreement. A lot of the worst problems right now come from that, by the way. And you need to go and read about the Brentwood Conference and find out what occurred there. Maynard Keynes is right in the midst of it. But I think that we have to look at this. We've gone so far away from what the framers intended, because they intended no foreign entanglements. And this was the first time, by the way, that we had a soldier that was in the European theater officially on European soil. That had never happened before Wilson. And Wilson has a lot to answer for in terms of where we are right now in this country. And they've, of course, taken that model and they run with it. But when you go back and look at Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th president of the United States, and you look at Woodrow Wilson, the 28th president of the United States, you can see that we went way off kilter with those presidents. It wasn't just them, but it's certainly them. It's certainly to a large extent, it was them. But there were others involved in it as well. Somebody referred me to a book. I might even mention this one before we go off the air, and that is somebody mentioned a book to me on Facebook. I get so much information from Facebook. And one of the persons said, Georgia, when I read this book, I thought of you. And the name of the book, I'm not familiar with the author of this book, but the name of the book is something like 9 Presidents Who Got It Wrong and 4 Presidents Who Tried to Get It Right. Something like that is the name of the book. And I don't know 4 presidents actually that got anything right. I don't. And but I looked at the pictures. I went on a line and then drew the book up, and I saw the pictures on it. And I saw the pictures they had on there, the 9 that got it wrong. And I agree, every last one of those 9s have been correctly identified. Now, as to the 4 that got it right or tried to get it right, I got to find out who those persons are, because I don't know who they were. And it certainly was not, Reagan. I would have the same problem with Reagan. I mean, he wasn't as bad as some of the others were, but I have the same problem with Reagan that Ron Paul had with him. Ron Paul was a Reagan supporter because he came in there saying all the right things, and he was making a case for when he said that government is not the solution to the problem, government is the problem. When he said that, he was right on target. But he was less than that as president in terms of the fact that under him, government also grew. Okay, before we get off the air, let me make this point I really wanted to make here, and that is this. I think we had disqualifiers this past week. You have the right to speak in this country without being intimidated or without violence. And anyone that does not stand up on that, because it's such a fundamental right we have in this country that makes us distinct and different and unique, to take that right from anyone in this country and we then accept that as par for the course, it endangers us on all the other rights in a domino effect as if it knocks down all the other rights, because it's primary that we have the right to speak in this country. And those that object to that speech, they have the right to, in fact, speak elsewhere in other forums without interfering with the speech of the place where they object. Speak outside, for example. But they have no right to go inside the arena and stop speech. And when they did not speak to that, they disqualified themselves as being qualified to be president of the United States, because that's fundamental freedom, and you have to stand up for it absolutely. Okay, there's more I came to say, but that is what we're looking at right now. Pay attention, because tomorrow is a very critical day. In Ohio and Florida, it's your time to stand up. Okay, until next week, we want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.